Welcome to the Business SOS podcast. This is Rich Sierra, founder and president of the Florida Small Business Legal Center. This is episode 69 of Business SOS. We're very excited that you're listening to us and listening to me and every single week, and I hope I'm providing valuable information to you as to navigate the challenging waters of the legal challenges that you face in your journey as a business owner. A big shout out to two clients of mine that I spoke to this week. Jose and Annabelle, they say they get valuable information from my podcast and they listen to me every week, and I truly appreciate you listening to me. Thank you very much. Today we're going to talk about 10 common mistakes business owners make with commercial leases, and why I go into this theme of the topic of commercial leases. Next to payroll, and I will submit to you or suggest to you that sometimes a commercial lease, your lease could be actually a greater expense than your payroll, depending on how many employees do you have. So there are two big expenses that you have in a business, and one is your payroll, the number of employees that you have, that you got to pay them every 2 weeks or whatever interval you pay, but also your commercial lease, that is the structure where you actually run your business. And this is often overlooked. The lease agreements are often overlooked, and they're not carefully analyzed. And in the context of not only the lease agreement, but also in the context of, is this lease good for my business? The amount that I'm going to pay in this lease, is this lease makes sense for me? And there are just so many mistakes that are made in evaluating a commercial lease in relation to the business that I want to go over some of them today because it's part of the business planning. And there's some devastating consequences for not being able to plan properly as to the proper commercial lease for your business, the proper space. I'm going to go over that right now. Let's get right into it. Mistake number one that I see, and obviously it's a bit self-serving, so, and I apologize for that, but obviously it is self-serving, so I will say that, is not hiring an attorney to review your lease. And many of the problems that I see coming to me say, you know what, I have a problem with the lease. The landlord didn't tell me that the AC was not working, or there was a leak on the roof, and I'm supposed to, I didn't know I had to pay their insurance. I didn't know how to pay taxes. There are just so many questions that come in to my office as a result of commercial leases. And my first question to them is that, did anyone help you evaluate this lease? And 9 out of 10 times the answer is no. We wanted to save some money. We couldn't afford it. A number of reasons. But the answer is no. An attorney was not retained to review this commercial lease and provide the proper context and advice that should have been given to the client prior to signing it. Once you sign the lease, you own that lease for a number of years. So it's important to have an attorney review it. The lease is a complex document, and it is drafted by attorneys, and a lease in and of itself is a pro-landlord document. It is really not a pro-tenant document. There's some minor areas or that the tenant has some rights within the lease, but for the most part, this is something for the benefit of the landlord. So you're already at a disadvantage with a lease agreement, and by not understanding what you're getting into, you're doing yourself a disservice. So understand that this is a document drafted by attorneys. It is for the benefit of the landlord. Get somebody to help you review it, help you analyze it, help you explain to you the provisions if you do not understand any provisions of the lease, and then go ahead and decide whether this lease is good for you or not, whether you want to negotiate some terms. But please, get the proper advice. It is a large financial commitment. Not only is the lease a complex document that, unless you do this for a living or have rented many properties in the past, commercial properties in the past, you're not going to be familiar with its provisions and the intricacies of this document. But it's also a huge financial commitment. And I'm just going to give you a very simple example of the type of commitment that you're entering into for a typical, retail store in a mall. And I'm just going to give you round numbers because that's what I work with. So say you rented a space at a retail location. You have a gift shop area that you sell, basically serve gifts, specialty gifts for the holidays or specialty items. And the lease is $5,000 per month. And you are signing for a 5-year lease. So right there, you made a commitment. It's 5 times 12, $60,000. Times another 5, you made a $300,000 commitment, financial commitment when you entered into that lease. And that obviously does not include taxes, insurance. I'm just making the point that the importance of the lease is significant to your business and to you financially. So the question is, will you pay $700, for example, to an attorney to review a document in which you're going to enter into commitment, financial commitment for $300,000? And that's a question for you. You have to make that determination, but please understand that it's a big financial commitment with a lease, and it should not be taken lightly. Mistake number 2, not reading your own lease. And I'm surprised by the number of people that do not read their own lease. They buy businesses, they buy a business, it's the first business they buy, in some cases, second business they buy, and they say, I got the lease assigned, and said, did you read the lease? No, I just, went ahead and signed it. And I'm making that a very simple example, and I'm not making light of it, but the point is, people, because they're overwhelmed with the amount of documents that they have to sign, they're excited about getting into a brand new business. They're told, perhaps there's a realtor involved or a business broker. These are standard. They're just basically all the same. Leases have common clauses, but they're not the same. Not every lease is the same. So I'm surprised that number of business owners do not read their own leases. And my question is, did you read it? No. You have to read it. I'm happy to analyze it for you. I'm happy to discuss the lease for you, but you have to read your own documents. So that's a mistake number 2. And my role as a business owner is to help you understand that lease. Obviously review it, but I'm not going to just read it for the sake of reading it if you don't read it. You have to read it, and we can go over the terms. We can go over any questions you may have, but you have to basically read your own document. And my rule with contracts, if you heard me before, is like, if you do not understand the lease, do not sign it. If you do not understand a document, do not sign it. Make sure you understand its provisions before you sign a document, because you will own that document. You will own that obligation. Mistake number 3, and I kind of going to put this one right at the beginning of the podcast because it's important to understand this mistake. It's the failure to make realistic financial projections in relation to your business. And one of the things that I recommend to anyone going into a brand new business is to get a business plan, prepare a business plan, or have somebody help you write a business plan. Why is that? Because there are financial projections that you make. You have your sales projections, you have your expenses, you have your operating cost, you have your cash flow projections, and you have to be realistic as to those projections in order to determine whether or not this particular lease is good for your business. And when I talk to brand new business owners that come to me with issues regarding the lease agreements, I asked the question, well, how much is the lease? I mean, and I looked at the lease, it's like $10,000 a month, for example. And I said, have you done this before? No, sir, for brand new business. And so what are you selling? And sometimes they're selling, it's a restaurant or it's a, some type of service business. And right there, it's a red flag when you have a large amount on a lease that deals with a large amount of money you have to pay every month. I said, what is your average sale like? What are you selling? What type of volume do you have per month in terms of sales. So we go over that. And one of the things that I see here is that, and I asked the question, what is your break-even point? And they do not know the answer to that. That's what I know that there's something wrong. Because you as a business owner need to understand your break-even point. You need to understand your financials. You need to understand how much money you need to make in order to be able to meet your expenses every month. If you do not know that number, you're in trouble. And that's one of the mistakes. And this goes beyond reading the lease. This is about you making sure that the lease you're getting into, you can generate enough sales, generate enough revenue to be able to support that lease. And many business owners do not do that. They just, unfortunately go with hope and say, let's go for it and hope that it works out. That's just not a good strategy. So, and I'm making the point strongly because I just don't want you, if you're in a situation that you're about to look into a lease, I want you to give you these warning signs that, hey, before you go into a very expensive lease, run some numbers. And there are many business plan templates that are available for free online. If not, hire a business coach, hire an accountant to help you work those numbers. But once you sign that lease, it is yours. I see also within this point is not knowing how many sales are needed to meet expenses or how many clients that are needed to meet expenses. And that's something that you should know as a business owner because that's going to determine whether you're going to be successful or not. You're going to have challenges along the way, of course, like every business will have. But if you do not know how many sales you got to make, how many customers you got to have, what is your daily revenue to be able to meet your expenses, the lease is not going to magically pay for itself. So that's a mistake that I see often, and inevitably it happens and they come to me when they're 2 months behind in rent. And then I go back, okay, what happened? And usually it's one of those mistakes. Mistake number 4, failure to inspect the lease premises before signing the contract. This is very important. And why you need to do that. So, and it goes into, let's see, the section of maintenance and the lease. I don't know if I think I'm going to cover that later, but as a tenant for a lease of premises, you will be responsible for some maintenance and repairs. It is almost in every single lease that I see. You'll most likely be responsible for anything in the interior that happens in your premises. If you're in a retail store, the glass, anything electrical within your unit, you'll be responsible for. Plumbing as well, carpeting, anything inside your unit you're going to be responsible for. And also the HVAC system, the air conditioning system. For the most part, you will be responsible for that. So often what happens is that I get a call, say, I got into this lease 2 years ago. It's a 5-year lease. The AC broke down, and it's $10,000 to repair it. So the landlord is telling me that I got to pay for it. I said, okay, send me the lease. I'll begin to review the lease. And it says there, within the section of that maintenance and repairs, that you're responsible for electric, plumbing, HVAC system. And I said, okay, did anyone, when you went into this lease, did anyone inspect this unit? No. They told me that it was okay, it was going to be working when I started. How old was that? How old is that unit? It's about 10 years old. Very likely that unit was going to be needed to be replaced during your term of that lease. So that's a mistake. If that particular example, that client that I'm sharing with you, that hypothetical client, is just an example that I'm giving to you, but it's really not that far from what has happened in my career, things that I've experienced, is that if this particular tenant would have had a AC company go in and inspect the HVAC unit and get a report and say, listen, this unit is going to last another 2 years. Then you can go back and negotiate with the landlord. Listen, this unit is not going to make it through my lease term, especially if I'm going to get a 5-year lease with a 5-year option to renew. Okay, so you have potentially 10 years within your tenancy. So you know that right there in year 2, according to the AC repairman or technician, it's need to be replaced. You can negotiate with the landlord. You have to replace this unit when it breaks down. I'm not going to replace it. And you can negotiate that beforehand. The landlord is not going to tell you. They're going to tell you everything's going to be working order when you move in. In fact, they'll even give you 30 days that it's going to work. But once you sign it, you walk in, it is your responsibility. So what you have to do is have the proper inspections. What type of inspections? Go over that. Obviously, an AC inspection. You can have an electrical inspection as well. Plumbing inspection. I will get a roof inspection as well. And I'll tell you why. Even though the roof is not your responsibility, the consequences of having a defective roof, and I'm dealing with some issues with that as at the present time, is that you could have a leak in that roof and damage your business. Your computers, if you have customers coming in. So by not inspecting the roof, even though it's not your responsibility, you could have a problem later on, especially in Florida. It rains so much that you can have water in your premises. And then trying to contact the landlord to get it repaired, and there's some rights you have to force them to to repair it or to compel them. Otherwise, you can get out of the lease, but that's a different conversation in terms of the mechanism. The point is, the damage to your business could be devastating, especially as a startup. Getting a roof inspector there costs you a few $100s. Take a look at it, or have some type of provision there that if there's any leaks, they got to fix them within 10 days. Okay? But have roof inspection, I'll definitely recommend. Pest control. Pest control inspection as well. Say you're in a retail location, like you have a strip malls here in Florida, pretty much everywhere, and then you have a restaurant next to you. You have, a retail store. You have a daycare. So you want to have a pest control inspection to make sure there's no pests, coming from any of the premises. Pest control company will come in, do an inspection, give a certificate, looks good, everything is fine. So, and I've had situations that tenants say, well, the restaurant next door or whatever, I'm getting a lot of, pests, a lot of roaches, rodents, etc. It's just nasty stuff. You need to know this. And again, the landlord cannot prohibit you from getting those inspections at your own expense. You say, you know what, I'm interested in the place. Do you mind if I go ahead and have, at my own expense, have some people inspect the property? We'll coordinate when, but I want to take a look at all these inspections. And in some cases, one inspector can do many of these. You don't have to have like one for each. But the point is that it's important to inspect the property that you're about to lease for 5 years. And it only costs you a few $100s. I will also look for a mold inspection. And I will just bring somebody in to do a mold inspection as well. Okay? Because if you have mold in the property, it could be a problem for you later on. I would also ask if any work has been done on the property in the last year. And I'll give you an example. I will say, find out, have you done any construction here? Have you done any repairs? Have you done any remodeling? Have you put any type of new electric? Have you done any new plumbing? And the reason for that is that I've run into situations that landlords do that sometimes without permits. And in one instance, they were doing they did electrical work with residential cabling as opposed to commercial cabling, and they would not have passed inspection of the city, and then they rented the place to my clients. We subsequently were able to get out of that lease, but it's a process to do that. An inspection, asking that question is important, and they have to disclose that to you. It's good to ask for it via email so you have a documentation to that. But also I will look at the address and go to the city's website and find out any permits have been pulled for that particular location. Those are things that an attorney can help you with, but I'm giving you the tips right now. Mistake number 5, Failing to negotiate lease terms. Often clients get their leases, they just negotiate, they take it at face value, they accept every single term, regardless how onerous it is. And I asked the question, did you read the lease? Sometimes it's no. I read it, but I didn't understand it. I really wanted to buy this business. I wanted to get into this business. So I signed it. And so mistakes in this compounding. Leases are negotiable. The landlords have an interest of having a tenant in the commercial property because that's where they generate revenue. That's where the property, that's what they do for a living. That's what they want to make sure that property is generating income and rent payments. And you can negotiate depending how motivated the landlord is with respect to having that space filled. You can negotiate on rent. You can negotiate on perhaps some rent abatement for a number of months. You can negotiate on the maintenance. You can negotiate on personal guarantees. And we'll talk about that probably in the next episode. You can negotiate in renewal terms. You can negotiate in maintenance. There's a lot of things you can negotiate. Leases are negotiable. Now, they may or may not agree depending how motivated they are. But, one of the mistakes that I see is people fail to negotiate their leases and they accept them at face value and they sign them, and then that's where we are. Mistake number 6, ignoring rent escalation clauses. Or how the rent is going to increase every year or how much. You need to understand, especially if you're looking at your business plan, you have to understand how this rent is going to affect increase in relation to your revenue. For example, if the lease increases 3% per year for the first 5 years, you have to make your projections proportionate or in relation to that particular increase. Are your sales going to increase 3% per year? Your business is going to grow 3% per year? Because that's going to compound. It's the 3% is going to increase, then it's going to go another 3%. It's going to compound. So when you look at you have to put that in a spreadsheet, and you have to see how is that going to affect you. Because the lease rent that you're going to pay now at the beginning of this lease will not be the same that you'll be paying 5 years from now. And whether or not, and then you have an option of 5-year renewal, the question is whether that renewal is going to take you above market rate, or are you going to be within the market rate? So if you have a lease that increases 3% per year, goes to 10 years, then at 5 years to look at market rate most likely is going to be higher. They're not going to lower that rent. Then you got to say, okay, is my business going to grow that much? Will I be able to afford that lease? So I want you to think about that and put those projections in place. Or you're going to say, I'm going to stay here for 5 years and then perhaps look for another location because the rent may escalate to a point that might be unaffordable. Because there's no requirement for the landlord to give you a rate that is less let me rephrase that. There's no requirement for the landlord to give you a market rate if it happens to be less than the rent escalation clause. So your rent can increase as much as you want pursuant to your contract, but the market rate might be lower. So you can just understand that as you develop your business plan. Over that point. I touched upon this point. This mistake number 7, not understanding maintenance and repair responsibilities. What are your responsibilities with respect to your repairs and maintenance? What are the lender's responsibilities? Lender's responsibility, for the most part, I went over the tenant responsibility to a point, what you're responsible for, but also look at what is the lender responsible for. Lender, for the most part, is going to be responsible for the roof and common areas. So that, and if there's a central AC that have all the tenants, if it's an office, for example, most likely the lender will cover that. But understand what a lender's responsibility is with respect to the lease agreement. Mistake number 8, failure to verify with the city or the county if the property is zoned for the type of business that you want to operate. And that happened to me a number of times, with leases. So one example was a number of years ago, and I think I mentioned this in the podcast. A client of mine wanted to open an ice cream shop, just at a retail location, and signed the lease, was very excited. It went to the city, and the city said, well, that particular location is not zoned for a restaurant. You cannot, or anything that provides food service. And there might be a number of reasons for that. It might be a number of reasons because of parking capacity. There might be a number of reasons why that particular spot might not be, zoned for that location, or you might not be able to open an ice cream shop at that particular space. But that person signed the lease. Interestingly enough, this was brought up back to the landlord. Said, listen, we cannot get into this lease because it's not zoned for that, so you cannot perform where the purpose of the lease was in the first place. We actually had to sue to get out of that lease, which is insane, but it had to happen. And eventually we were successful getting out of that lease. But my point to you is this: a simple call to the city or the county, depending where you live in, will tell you whether or not your business that you want to operate, you can operate in that location. Just drive there to the business licensing office, or just put in a phone call. They'll tell you. They'll have a list they have the address, and they have a list of businesses that can operate. Okay? Mistake number 9, subleasing the property without lender's consent. This goes after you decide you had the lease, and you have some space. And I'll just give you an example of a barber or a hair salon. Okay, so you have a hair salon, and you want to rent some chairs, or you want to rent a space for a nail salon as well. You want to have a combination to provide both services. So you work out a deal with another individual that you're going to sublease a certain section of your space for them to operate a nail salon within your hair salon. All right, but you didn't tell the landlord. So this person's paying your rent, have like 4 chairs, 4 nails. Person has a key, has access to it, but the landlord does not know. The landlord, for some reason, finds out. And the landlord will tell you you're in violation of this lease, because there's, in basically most leases that I've seen, if not all of them, there's a prohibition of you subletting any part of your space without landlord's consent. So that's very important. If you intend to do that, have a provision in your lease that, you know what, I'm going to have a space here to sublease. Is that okay? And include that as part of your negotiation. And the landlord may require some additional revenue, may require that I want to know who's going to be subleasing. I want to copy the sublease, because the landlord has the right to know who's leasing his or her premises. Also, there's potential liability there. Somebody gets injured, providing the services, they're going to sue that individual, whoever's operating the nail salon within your hair salon. They're going to sue you. They're going to sue the landlord. The landlord does not know what happened or why this person is here. You're going to get a suit from the landlord for contribution and for breach of contract. And guess what? Your insurance might not even cover it, because that particular nail salon is not covered by insurance. You're trying to make a few dollars to try to subsidize or supplement the rent. If you don't do it properly, it could be a problem later for you. So that's a mistake that I see, especially with businesses that can have a certain section, and they're symbiotic businesses that can help each other. Just have your landlord's consent, and that'll take care of that. Last but not least, is going to be overlooking personal guarantees. So that's mistake number 10. I think I went over all of them, right? Let me see here. Did I miss one? Yes. I think I'm good. Mistake number 10, overlooking personal guarantees. So what is a personal guarantee in relation to a lease? Is exactly what it means. You will personally guarantee the performance of the contract in the event the business fails. In the event the business cannot make a payment, you're personally guaranteeing that lease. So, and that goes into why you need an attorney reviewing these leases, is because not only are you getting into a liability, in the example that I gave you earlier, you're getting a $300,000 contract, and but now you're personally guaranteeing. So means that if the business fails, you will be on the hook for that $300,000 or what the remaining balance of the lease, unless they're able to get a tenant to lease for the remaining balance of whatever is remaining on the lease. So you can negotiate that. If the landlord is motivated to fill the space, because it's not good to have empty spaces in a type of location like a retail space, you can negotiate the limitation of liability on that lease and say, you know what, I'll guarantee up to 1 year, which is significant. Well, I'll basically give you a guarantee, but if the first 2 years I'm in good standing, I want that guarantee to be removed. So you can negotiate that. People sign it, it's usually at the end of the lease and, Exhibit 5 or whatever it might be. But the point is that you can negotiate that, and that is often overlooked. So, and they also make sign, the individual and the spouse of the partner, even if the partner or spouse is not involved in the business, you can negotiate that on, he or she's not signing it. This is my guarantee. So those are things that we can help you with, an attorney can help you with, and that's what I recommend, that you seek legal advice before signing a commercial lease. This is all for today. Thank you for listening. I hope you got some good points today regarding commercial leases and what mistakes to avoid. If you want to reach me, you can reach me at Rich, R-I-C-H, at richsierra.com. My website, if you're interested in our legal services, is floridasmallbusinesslegalcenter.com. We're on YouTube, youtube.com/@RichardSierra. You can call us at 866-842-5202. We're on Instagram at FSB Legal. Also, on my book, Business SOS, 8 Common Legal Mistakes Business Owners Make and How to Avoid Them, it's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can ask for your local bookstores as well. If you like the podcast, please give us a 5-star review. Share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you enjoy your shows. Until next week, this is Rich Sierra. Remember that my goal is to help you succeed.